Sven, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks also to the inspiring speakers who nicely set the context for this discussion with the different elements of the statistical context and challenges. And indeed, I think there we can truly say that we stand on the shoulders of giants with 50,000 people ensuring data quality, without which we cannot do any work on the indicators. Then also the data revolution and the science revolution, and then the aspects of policy needs and knowledge management. I will try to go into the specific context of this Competence Centre in this setting, and I will then say a bit about the history of the work on composite indicators in the Commission and in the JRC, and how this Competence Centre could contribute to better policy support. And I'm glad that I can present this together with Michela Cesana, who has been one of the driving force at the JRC on the work on composite indicators, and who will go more in detail on the measures. Let me start with this quote, which kind of matches some of the remarks made earlier, and it's illustrate, and it stresses the need for synthesis. So as it says, we are drowning in information while starving for wisdom, and the world henceforth will be run by synthesizers, people able to put together the right information at the right time, think critically about it, and make important choices wisely. So I think we could consider maybe that most of us here in this room are actually synthesizers in one way or another. It's an essence of most of our jobs, I think. And maybe the tools that the Competence Centre can provide and promote and share may help in this systematically synthesizing, which can also help communication. So composite indicators and scoreboards can be used to synthesize these broad policy concepts, especially when they're multidimensional. And we represent them in a single indicator or limited indicators in the context of scoreboards. So some examples were mentioned already, like issues of well-being. You cannot measure that with a single indicator. Similarly for competitiveness, innovation, good governance, etc. So as has been discussed before as well, the composite indicators can be very powerful tools for policy. So they help the communication, they can help monitoring, ranking, and benchmarking. And they can be drivers of reform. Think, for instance, there are several examples of this, like the doing business indicators. And as mentioned before, there are, of course, some risks to that, and caution is needed. Because the policy messages can also be partial or misleading if the indicators are wrongly constructed or misinterpreted. I think Michela will say some more about how to construct the composite indicators and what quality control services we can provide later on. But the essence was mentioned before as well, which is a good conceptual framework on the one hand, where we rely on knowledge of and expertise of policy DGs, and then the statistical expertise and methods that we can provide. So then we live in a fascinating time with this information explosion that Vladimir also mentioned, and this provides a lot of scope for better policy and better informed policy, but it also represents major challenges, because we have difficulties coping with the sheer amount of information. And that's also related to the capacity of the human brain. We are terribly bad at data processing, and especially if it gets multidimensional. One of the most cited papers in psychology is the magical number 7 plus or minus 2. Some limits on our capacity for processing information. This was published in 1956 by George Miller, And his law suggests that the human brain can cope with 7 plus or minus 2 pieces of information at the same time. And it's probably no coincidence that many scoreboards or useful scoreboards have between 5 and 9 indicators. So a good design of a monitoring frame is essential for good use of information for policy. And we should aim for sound and systematic synthesis to deal with this limited brain capacity. Now, how has this information revolution found its way into policy indicators and tools? We have been looking into the Eurolax system to find mentions of composite indicators. The first mention we found was in 1973 on a report of the Monetary Committee, where they had a discussion on whether to use a single indicator or a composite indicator. And at that time, they still decided to go for the single indicator for many reasons. And from then it took until 1987 before actually the first composite indicator was proposed in legislation at the European Commission. This was a very simple measure for determining whether an EU region was eligible for community assistance in the agricultural policy. Now, since then, there has been a massive increase in the use of indicators and composite indicators. So we found here 130 composite indicators used at the Commission, developed or used by the Commission, across a wide range of policy DGs. The number of scoreboards used is even a large multiple of these. And half of these composite indicators have been developed with the contribution from the JRC. So here we also see a list of recent indicators and the scoreboard, I think, that we have worked on, and it shows that it covers a really wide range of issues where we can or could provide our methodological expertise, and combining this with the conceptual knowledge and on content of the different policy DGs and institutions. So we at the JRC started our work on composite indicators in 2002 with an overview of the state of the art on composite indicators. And in the same year we got the first policy request to work on an index. Since 2003 we have then developed a website which ever since, or very quickly, reached #1 position in search engines and has remained there. So if we look for composite indicators on a search engine, the first one that will come up is the JRC activity on composite indicators. On the further timeline, I will maybe refer to the flyer that we distributed. Maybe noteworthy the cooperation with the OECD and the handbook that we wrote with them together in 2008. So let me conclude my part, and then Michaela will continue. So demands and JRC activity continue to grow in recent years. In 2014, we set up the COIN Research Group at the JRC to ensure continuity. And now, at the start of 2016, we are ready to start this Commission-wide Competence Centre on Composite Indicators and Scoreboards. And this should provide the infrastructure for managing the Commission-wide knowledge and competences on composite indicators and scoreboards. It should also allow sharing best practices and developing a community of use across policy DGs that can then contribute to building new composite indicators and scoreboards and reviewing existing ones. I think in the interventions before we also heard the importance of the maintenance of scoreboards, the open nature. I think these are all issues that fit very well into this infrastructure that needs to be developed. So in all, it will ensure, or it should ensure even better than now, combining the JRC methodological expertise and experience with all the knowledge that's there in the policy services on the concepts and the conceptual frameworks in their fields. So this should allow reaping the benefits of the data explosion towards better informed policy making, of course with a lot of help and support from the colleagues at Eurostat. Now, Michaela will continue, provide more detail on what we actually do.